This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living. Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. We are coming to you, I guess at this point, not so live from Maywood, but right now we're at Maywood. And so if you hear a little stream in the background, that's beautiful. If you hear a bunch of screaming, that's the volleyball courts, and probably not so beautiful, but they're having fun. You might hear a car drive by. You may hear an announcement come over. We pray that you forgive us for that, because I think we're going to be bringing some really good information today from really what I like to refer to as God's country here in Hamilton, Alabama. Ben, as always, is with me. And Will, how you guys doing?
Well, we are nearing the end of the week, so tired.
Praise be.
Yes, praise be that we are nearing the end of the week, but we're tired. Though our outer man is perishing, our inner man is being renewed day by day. And so I'm excited still to be able to be at Maywood. Sort of always glad to see the end of the week come, but always sad to see the end of the week come too. So it's always a little taste of heaven being around Christians from all over the place. Will, how are you?
I'm tired. But it's like at that point where the emotions are all kicking in. You know, a lot of teenagers making some commitments, recommitments. Can't help but be excited about those things and ready to see my wife and daughter. That's what I'm ready for.
You doing all right too, Travis?
Man, I'm doing great. Love getting to sit down at camp, whether it's on the mic and recording or away and kind of in private, to sit down and talk with some of my favorite Bible scholars and ministers and lovers of Jesus. And so that's not going to change today on today's episode, as we have a tremendous example to me with us, and in Don Williams. And so, Don, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and what you've been doing at camp this week?
Okay. For 30 years, I was a full-time minister. And then for the last 13 years, I've been the director of the North Alabama Christian Children's Home in Florence, Green Hill, Alabama, where we take care of underprivileged children who've been either abused, abandoned, and or neglected. And for years, they've been coming to Maywood. And whenever I came on board, I said, who goes with them? And they said, well, nobody. I said, well, somebody needs to go. And I said, I like going to camp, and gone a lot of my years. Many years ago, I came here as a 10-year-old to Maywood. I think this is like a 42nd or 43rd year of camping, directing, counseling, teaching somewhere. So this way they get to see a different side of me. You know, There I got to be the director and sometimes deliver the bad news or the rules or whatever. I was eating lunch just a little while ago, and one of them who's here, one of our new children, just bumped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, she would have done that on campus." So you're opening up the doors, and you get to meet a lot of people. And this year I'm double dutying. Normally I just do teaching, but I'm teaching as well as being a counselor for 10, 11, and 12-year-olds.
Oh. And it's been an interesting week for you guys, just saying. So
true, very true. So,
which is an extra jewel in your crown if you have any student under the age of 12 at camp.
Yes,
that's exactly right. So, Don, you got a lot of experience in a lot of different things, and we're hopefully going to touch on several different things. But one thing that has kind of been something that you've dealt with, you were mentioning to us that I was unaware of, having some family members that are beginning to deal with dementia and things like that. We were talking, and you said you have a lot of experience in that area, and a lot of time, experience is the best education. And so you dealt with some things, I believe, with your mother.
Yes, yeah. Had been teaching grief support classes for a long time, and about probably 8 years ago, somebody said, "What about grief and dementia?" And I thought, I really hadn't thought that much about it, even though it was a form of grief. And so I started doing some research on it and whatever. And then about 4 years ago, it became personal. When we noticed that Mom was beginning to forget some things and repeating stories over and over again and that type of thing. And so we encouraged them to go to the UAB Kirkland Clinic, and I went with them I remember going with them the first time, and they did an MRI of Mom's brain. And about 2 months later, it was a Friday afternoon. Some things you just don't forget. The Friday afternoon, and it was in 2016, and the Dr. Nadelson called me first because I was the point of contact and said, we've looked at an MRI from 3 years before and this one, and there's significant brain shrinkage. And our diagnosis is dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. So I had to be the one to tell my dad and also my sister and my twin brother. And that began a journey that lasted 37 months. And it will be 3 years next month that she passed away. But, as grace and mercy would have it, she's basically suffered for 1 week, and she was in the hospital, and she knew everybody up until the day before. So it turned out pretty good.
And as dementia and Alzheimer's goes, it's like a lot of things. There's no real way of knowing what level and what thing that people are going to go through. So you may deal with it for long period of time. You may deal with it for a short time. It may be, there's so many different levels of that, right?
There's studies now that are coming out just in the last year or so that says that dementia begins 20 years before you actually may see it.
Oh.
And it can last for, I know I can name somebody right now whose mother had it for 20 years, dealt with it for 20 years. The biggest one that we often think about is Alzheimer's. I tell people if dementia is the last name, then Alzheimer's is the firstborn son, because 60 to 70% of all dementia is Alzheimer's.
Can you explain, maybe, I know for me, like the differencing in those words and kind of the stages or what's there?
With dementia, there is the general loss of memory. Just the inability to pull up things, the hippocampus, which is in the front portion of the brain, that stores a short-term memory. The immediate memory, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, is basically what they call it. That's the immediate short-term memory. Just stops working. The neurons in there don't work together like they need to. Could be the beta plaque or other kinds of protein that get in there and just sort of clam up the works. There's other things that sometimes they find in diseased brains. But all those things can result to the point that you can't remember the things that you need to do. Like, for example, sometimes you may ask a dementia patient, do you know who I am? We'll count to 8 seconds, and they may be able to answer the question because it takes them that long to process, first of all, the question, but then secondly, who you really are. It's sort of like it's rolling around in there, and sometimes it's on the tip of their tongue, but sometimes it doesn't happen. That is also aided and abetted by what is called sundowning, where a person gets their time clock changed and sleeps during the day, and then is up at night when the caregiver, often a family member, is trying to get some sleep themselves. You often notice in dementia patients that the later in the day, the more confused they get, because again, that's part of it as well. They get to the point where there is problems with speech and understanding. They hear wonderfully. Their vision is often never impaired, but it's the process of understanding the words. Often there's changes in personality and behavior. It's easy to say you either become bitter or better. Some become better, sweeter, kinder. Maybe they weren't that in real life, but the medicine and also the disease causes them to calm down. The other becomes more hostile.
The other way.
And folks who were the sweetest of saints now may be cursing like a sailor.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, people will say, I can't believe Grandma did it. She was a Bible teacher. She taught me the Bible. We sang church songs together. Now she's cursing like a sailor and saying all kinds of vulgar things. What is this, Well, one of the sad problems with dementia is that it affects the part of the brain where they're called inhibitory circuits, and they're gone. And because they're gone, there's no governor, if you will, to hold back from saying
I'm so
those
scared
things.
right now.
When
that day comes.
So Travis, this could mean
Yeah,
that you're already there.
Yeah.
So,
man.
Shall we pause and pray right now?
Yeah, exactly. Please.
But the end result is that those things that they have heard, but they never would have used, they do. Or sometimes they, do things that are just way out of ordinary. And again, I tell people, it is the brain talking. It is a disease of the brain, not of the soul. And that's really, really important for people to keep in mind. Because this person is still the child of God that you knew him to be. It's just being attacked by a disease that causes them to do things that otherwise they wouldn't do.
Well, it's like all the things that, if somebody's coming over to your house, you clean up. You put everything away, and even in our lives, not in a sense of I'm going to do those things all the time, but when we clean up spiritually, there's things we pack away that we go, I'm not ever getting those things out again. Those things are they're in the subconscious because I might have done them. I might have said them in the past, but I've put those things away. And like you said, it's like opening that door that has all those things there, and it floods because you have no ability to inhibit it anymore.
Right.
You can't keep it away.
Right. It's not like, I'm going to sow my old white oats while I'm an old person now, because, it's not that
There's
at
no
all.
control over it.
And then increased reliance on what they call ADL, activities of daily living. They can't drive anymore. They may not be able to put their clothes on in a proper way. They may not be able to stay with themselves because of all the things. They finally get to the point where they don't know how to use the restroom. They have to have assistance or something of that nature. So that's dementia. The Alzheimer's part of it is especially some of that same stuff, but especially the short-term memory. They can, with great clarity, tell you a story 50 years ago. Now, they may miss some of it, but that's still there in their brain. But it's the short-term things. It's the names. It's the, who you are. It's what happened. This was a part of my wife's family. Her great-grandmother, they called it hardening of the arteries, but it was probably that. Her grandmother, an aunt, and then her mother all passed away from it. Well, that's my wife's greatest concern. Yeah. And she does, all the brain games and everything, painting and the art, all the things to try to keep her. And she's hoping that she's got her dad's genes because he was partial Cherokee Indian. And for some reason, Cherokee Indians have a smaller chance of getting this as opposed to others. Wow. So she's hoping that that's part of her genes as well, her and her sister both. But, it's just goes along with that. Right now, 5.8 million people in America have Alzheimer's. I remember when, years ago, it was under 5 million. So it just keeps on growing. 2/3 of that are women. Women get it 2/3 more so than men. But folks 65 and older, 1 out of 8 will develop Alzheimer's disease. 65 and older. There's a few 100,000 that have early onset Alzheimer's, anything before 65. And you may know some people who, and that's really tough because Medicare doesn't kick in, and it's really, really a problem. 45% of folks 85 and older, folks are aging longer, that's a good thing. But 45% of them are going to develop dementia. So you got that to deal with. Every 68 seconds, somebody in America develops Alzheimer's. By 2050, every 33 seconds, somebody in America is going to have it. So it's not going away. It's getting worse. 2 million family members take care of their loved ones. Typically, family caregivers provide 75% of that care. A lot of times, it's the wife or the husband. And so even though they may bring outside people in, if they're still living there, they're still a part of it. So, think about that person in your church that has this, and the husband or the wife looks haggard or thin or just because they're dealing with it 24/7. Mm-hmm. Typically, you put 70 hours a week into it, but they're not getting away from it. Even if caregivers are there, they're still coming back to him or her and saying, hey, what about this? Or this happened. What do you want me to do? And So they're still a part
So
of it.
with all of that and knowing all of how the numbers are growing, are there any indicators as of yet to what the cause of this is in our society?
Well, they're doing a lot of study in regards to the brain itself, and they've taken a lot of diseased brains. It was Dr. Alzheimer, Lois Alzheimer's in 1907 that had a mental patient. They noticed all these changes, and so he tried to do some things, and she died. And the next year, with the family's permission, he took that brain and began to see all this plaque and this buildup of beta protein, and gave those findings, and that's why it's called after him Alzheimer's disease. But they continue to do studies. There's a whole lot of money. Our government is really good to see the need, because this is a growing thing. I mean, it's the sixth leading cause of death in America, but it's catching up with the others. Heart disease and cancer, and those type of things. So it's getting closer, and so they're putting a whole lot of money. Thankfully, both sides of the aisle see the need to fund this, because it's not going away. But they still haven't come up with anything. There's some trials.
What are some things that you can tell people who are either beginning to deal with the disease or family members of those who are beginning to deal with it? Do's, don'ts, whatever.
It's important to get a diagnosis. A lot of times somebody says, well, grandma's got Alzheimer's. Well, how do you know? Well, because she's forgetting things. 11% of the time, the diagnosis is inaccurate. It's not dementia. It could be medicine that's interacting with one another. It could be UTIs that are causing issues. It could be several other things. Maybe they're having depression, which can be treatable, and yet because of that, certainly alcohol can cause some issues in that regard. But there's other kinds of medicine. There can be a lack of vitamins in the body. So it's really, really important to get a diagnosis. And typically your medical doctor is going to send you to a neurosurgeon and let them do some looking at that. Take the test. There's a test. I mean, I know when we went, and I went with Mom again after that. She talked to all of us. I remember the lady asking her to introduce us, not introduce, but her introduce who she had with her. She got it all right, and then she said, well, Miss Williams, I want to talk to you for a while. And so we all left, and one of the nurses was telling us what she's doing. There's a standard test. There's variation of things, but I know the test that they gave her. And so a lot of times I tell people, I can tell you some of the questions. Dementia people are then known to even study ahead of time with the hope that they can remember it, but they can't, because it's different things. But I remember the first time it was 30 questions and she got 27 out of 30, and they thought that was really great. She got to the point where it was like 13 out of 30. And that was 2.5 years later. And so, it was digressing. You could see that same questions probably, as far as we know, but accept the diagnosis for what it is, feel the burn. In other words, list the losses that you experience because of this. You know what their losses are, but you as a family, you as a caregiver, what losses have you got? Maybe it's the grief for the future. Maybe you were going on a big Disney trip with grandpa and grandma, but they can't go anymore. And your family had been built up for this for a year. Maybe they were going to send everybody, and they were going to. Think about those things. Have someone on call. It's a long journey. The average is 6 years. It can be as much as 20 years. The average for Alzheimer's is 6 years. And so have somebody on call that you can call at all times. You got to mourn your losses, validate your feelings, let the tears flow. Romans 12:15, rejoice with those that do rejoice. But then he says, and, or, weep with them that weep. We've got to be great for the folks who have wonderful news, but we've got to be there in the long journey in the valley for the folks who are having it, because this isn't going to be a short thing. It's going to be a long-term thing.
I think that speaks, you're using scripture, the church, right? And I think that's something we always talk about and want to be better. Maybe they're not my relative, in an earthly sense, but they're my relative, or the caregiver is my forever family, we might say.
Yeah.
And so, offer to be on call if you're close enough to the situation, if you need some help.
So what tips might you give to us as a church who might be working with a family that has that in their family?
There at Florence Boulevard, we had some people who had this that came to church, and we told the wife who was bringing her husband, who was a preacher, we said, listen, when you get ready to come, you call us. We will meet you in the parking lot. Pull up to where people typically drive through if it was raining. We're going to take your car, let you go in with him because you're his point of contact.
Wow.
Don't need to go in alone. You need to go in with him because he feels comfortable with you. Let us park your car, and then we'll bring it to you afterwards. If there's a cry room or some place where they can go, Amory Church of Christ has a special room. It's for people with low immune systems or folks who, for whatever reason, need to be in a special place. They can see, but they can go to that room and worship there without concern about what he might or she might do, yell out or holler or whatever the case may be. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe a change of clothes, again, with their permission in the event that there's an accident while they're at worship services. Sometimes it gets to the point where you may have to take the worship to them because there's several things with dementia, but it's not just Alzheimer's. But with dementia, there's several things that continue to hang on. Art, music, and religion seem to be a part ingrained within their brains that stay with them long after all the others do. Dr. Daniel Potts down in Tuscaloosa wrote a wonderful book. His father, he was a handyman, and he used to work in a lumber yard. And he got to the point where he could not speak at all. But then they put him in front of a drawing board, and he produced beautiful art to the point that they made a book about that. And in that book, or in those drawings, he shows two men that are drawing, that are cutting wood, the old long saw, just by hand. And he said he saw over here a white guy, and over here he saw a black guy, and one was a winner and one the other end. And he said, "Is that?" And he named him, and he said tears began to come out of his dad's eyes, and that was his old partner. That he couldn't talk about him, but he could draw. But he was there, a part of my life. Church songs. Go and have a 15, 20-minute service. Sing the old songs. Sing the songs that they can, because they can with clarity remember Amazing Grace, and I love to tell the story. Use scripture, because I found my mom quoting scripture with a Sunday school teacher. She could still pull up those things. And it'll be good for the family, but it'll also be good for them as well. And that's so very important. Look for ways for them to succeed. You know what they can't do. Well, what can they do? My mother would be given the little cutout pictures for Sunday school that went to the children's classes, and she could stay within the lines and draw those pictures. And then Philip, my brother-in-law, would use them at Amory to hand them out. And that was something that she could do. She felt good about that. And that was so, there's so many things they cannot do. So look for ways, can they do chalk? Can they look in a garden? Can they help with a garden? Can they put different colors of sands and bases? All kinds of things that they easy often for them to do. And look behind the person. Think about, they say, remember the pillars of personhood. Who is this person? Someone sees my mom, but they don't see that she was a physical therapist for 20 years. She was a church secretary for 13 years. She was a preacher's wife for 65 years. She was a missionary in Russia teaching Bible classes. We put together a book all about who she was, who the family was, pictures, everything about it. And it was really, really neat. And every day that was a new book to my mom. there's all kinds of resources. The Alzheimer's Foundation of America, you can Google that. They have all kinds of things. And one of the wonderful things about that is they have licensed social workers available 7 days a week, like from 8 to 5, typically Monday through Friday, and then even on the weekend some. For people to call in, families to call in and say, hey, Dad's doing this. What do you suggest? Or the doctor's suggesting this. Is that a prescribed idea in your mind? But people for free that you can talk to who are trained to be able to help you and to give you all kinds of information. That's really, really good. Also in Alabama, the Dementia Education and Training Program out of Tuscaloosa. And they'll send you a big booklet, not only of how the brain of a normal person looks versus someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, but also other information about it. That number is 1-800-457-5679. 1-800-457-5679. And then out of Montgomery, there's Dementia Friendly Alabama. Again, they give a lot of good resources. And it's free, 334-240-4680. 334-240-4680, Dementia Friendly Alabama.
It looks like you've got a pretty big presentation that you're able to give. What's the best way to get in contact with you to maybe have you come and we kind of try to keep it to 25 minutes or so. And I know that that's not going to cover in depth what you've studied, but if they would like for you to maybe come or maybe even teleconference with the information that you have, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Thanks for asking. My brother and I often do dementia and cancer workshops like on a Saturday and Sunday together. And they can get in touch with me at donwheel55@yahoo.com. donwheel55@yahoo.com, or my phone number is 256-366-3327.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, you talked about stories.
Yeah.
And knowing people and something that's near and dear to us and has brought us together. We might have known each other before camp, but we haven't known each other as well without camp. And so we oftentimes, when we're here, like for people to share a story that you might share with us of your time here at camp that maybe stands out to you.
As a 10-year-old, so many years ago, came here, and I remember the last year I came, and I don't know if the trauma of that moment had anything to do with it or not. Probably not. But anyway, you didn't go into the mess hall. That's where you signed up everything. That's where it started, and only opened at certain times. So I'm there, and I remember this. I was big and 13, and there was this pretty 14-year-old girl, and I thought, I think I would just go up and introduce myself to her. So I get near her, and I say, hi, my name is Don Williams. I'm 13. And she said, well, I'm so-and-so, and I'm 14, and turned away. And I thought, okay, there you go. So I thought, all right, there's sports awaiting me, so forget everything else.
Rejection is remembered.
Well, I know Ben and I suffered through that at camp, but we know that Will was such a ladies' man. He never had to worry about girls turning him down.
You got that little white place in his hair that everybody just attracted to.
So cute.
Some point during when I was around 12 or 13, I went skating, and like everybody talked about, I love to skate. So I go skating. I skate with one foot, I'm like just peeling off with one, and I trip and fall. This girl trips over me. Never met her before. Never seen her since. Trips over me, looks back at me and said, I hate you. Got up and skated off. I hadn't skated a whole lot since then either. So, I understand. I'm glad you came back to camp.
For being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. Until next time, look for us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.